So, hello everyone, I'm Denes Boros, resident Grandmaster, and this is Viewer's Choice. Sadly, you've just missed an American-Dutch secret training match, which happened just minutes before this lecture. But you'll learn about these games when they play in real life. I won't disclose the names, but you can guess. One of the players were number 4 in the planet and 2 at one moment. So, let's start with this game that YouTube audience sent me between Michalache and Calin. Hopefully I said it right. Between 2 Romanian players. Michalache said that he had an amazing position, but then he budged it up somehow. Okay, let's take a look. D4, knight f6, c4, e6, c5. Can somebody help me? Which opening is this? Yes, the Benoni. D5. Well, if white would want it, he could play knight c3, and it would transpose into some sort of English opening with one c4. So c5, d5 takes, all very normal. e4, bishop g7, bishop e2, castle, castle, a6, a4, knight d7. Knight d7 is a classical move here, but I think black should rather play bishop g4, trying to exchange this very bad bishop. If h3 just takes, as most of the time in these Benoni structures, the knights are better than the bishops. But black played knight d7, bishop f4, knight e8. In general, white is slightly better in these positions because of this d5 and e4 center, and black doesn't really have as much control over the center here, although he might be able to use this e5 square for the knight later. Rook a3. Rook a3 is a little bit early. For some reason, for some mysterious reason, they still play rook a3 in these positions, most likely to bring the rook to b3. But the main idea in this position is something completely different. What else could white play for in this position? Any ideas? Black's usual plan is to go rook b8, knight c7 and b5. I'll give you an example like h3, rook b8, rook e1. You can't quite go to knight c7 immediately because the d-pawn is hanging, and then b5. And if black manages to play b5, black's position is usually pretty sound. So white needs to find a good plan himself so he won't be left behind if black plays b5. Yeah, knight d2, knight c4 is a good suggestion, which was actually played in the game. But there's a way of playing this position either with a5 to stop this b5 idea eternally. And if black plays b5, we just take, queen takes b6, and rook a2. Actually, I had a terrible experience playing this with the black side, because after this very, very quiet move rook a2, there's no more tactical ideas for black. You can't really double on the b line, because the b2 pawn is just way too defended. For example, if rook b8, I can just play, let's say, knight d2 against these queen b3 threats, and knight e5. Then how can we overprotect our position with white? It's basically a simple developing move I'm looking for here. Queen c2, exactly. Queen c2, and now everything is protected. The b2 pawn will never be captured, and if, let's say, bishop d7, because of this knight on d2, even b3 is possible, and knight c4s. I didn't consider taking on a6, because queen takes b2, and it can get messy. White doesn't need to do that. You can just play b3 and he's clearly better. And there is a good reason why this opening is called Benoni, which actually means tears of God, because black is just going to suffer eternally. Because apart from defending the a6 pawn, he doesn't really have a real plan and is mostly condemned to defend the position forever. All right, so a5 would have been an idea. He played rook a3, queen e7, queen c2, h6, knight d2. Now knight d2 I think is too early. It just gives too many space for black. How else could we play in this position?
C3 knight's just protected.
Well, this knight is already, the suggestion is to move this c3 knight. Well, the knight is already very well placed, so you don't need to move it. You only need to move pieces that are either undeveloped or they need to be removed for some reason. This bishop f4, for example, can be threatened with this idea of g5. So there is a typical move here that white players play. So in case of g5, they will have a stock move that they can make.
Can you play h3?
Yeah, h3.
H3 to have bishop h2.
So after g5, the bishop can drop back to h2 instead of g3. Because if the bishop drops back to g3, the main problem is that black plays knight e5, let's say knight d2, and f5. And the problem is, in this position, black is threatening to play f4 with a tempi, when if we put the bishop to h2 immediately, that doesn't work. Knight e5, knight d2, f5, and now f4 doesn't really come with a tempi. And in general, f4 could work, and white is slightly better most of the time. I think white should be better here. So black played, instead of h3, white played knight d2, knight e5, and this gives some initiative for black for no reason. Knight c4. Well, knight c4 is not a good move for many reasons. My first question is, who has the space advantage in this position? Black, no. Black doesn't have the space. White does, exactly. White has the space advantage in this position, so white has no interest in exchanging off pieces. So knight c4 therefore is unkilled for. Takes, takes, f5. In fact, b6 would be an idea here to stop a5, and also if rook b3, just simple rook b8, and black should be fine in this position. But f5 is played, rook e1, g5, bishop d2, f4. And in principle, if black manages to blockade the king side, his position is rather okay, if not better immediately. a5, a good move, trying to find some play on the queen side. Knight c7, knight a4 now is principled, as he's actually heading to b6. Also, this knight a4 allows white to have a great plan. What is white planning in this position? Where is white planning to play in the forthcoming struggle? On the queen side. So normally he would like to open up the position there, right? How can he achieve that? B4, exactly. White is kind of planning this b4 idea to blow up black's stronghold on c5, and then he will be much, much better. Black plays rook b8, which is kind of a mistake. He should have played knight b5 with the idea of waltzing into d4. And if the knight manages to land on d4, big trouble is coming. So knight b5 should have been played, but black played bishop d7, rook b8. Black played rook b8, but he missed white's next move. It's white to move and get a big advantage. What kind of tactical ideas can we imagine in this position?
Black king.
Yeah, the black king is in the bullseye of this bishop.
So e5.
E5 could be an idea. That's one idea. What other move can use the fact that this bishop is eyeing the king?
Well, knight takes c5.
So now there's a question whether we should play knight takes c5 or e5.
Probably knight takes e5.
So I have two suggestions. You said e5. Can you defend your opinion? Why e5 instead of knight takes c5?
No, I'm saying knight takes c5. I think e5, bishop takes e5 is...
Oh, so you're saying that knight takes c5 is good. Okay. Can you tell me why knight takes c5 and not e5?
Well, e5, I think he can actually defend. So, knight takes c5 just wins a pawn right away.
Because why?
Gives you a pretty big advantage.
If knight takes c5, d takes?
Oh, because d6.
Yes, and this covered check.
And
And it's over. So it's always important to notice the pattern of the bishop actually opening up the diagonal for the bishop. So we have to decide if the move is either e5 or knight takes c5. e5 unfortunately doesn't work as bishop takes e5. And there is not enough tricks left in this position. So knight takes c5, the good move, and Michalache actually played it. King h8, knight a4, bishop d7. And now the situation basically completely changed. White is a pawn up, and we need to decide how we should continue. In general, we should be much, much better, but we still need to play actively to prove our advantage. How can we continue with active play in this position?
well, bishop e4.
Bishop b4 is one way of putting pressure on d6. How else can we put some pressure on black's position? Even though we're a pawn up, we can still play for the initiative, and we should.
Well, bishop c3.
Bishop c3 is a good move. Actually, that's what Michalache played. But there's a very natural move that could be played with white, and I would suggest that if I'd be white. What's our worst piece in this position? The knight on a4 is actually doing nothing now.
Knight
So how can we improve that? Can you raise your hand? Yeah? Knight b6, yes. Sorry. Knight b6 is a very good move as it takes away this c8 square, and in the long run white be able to bring the rook to c7, and that will be devastating. So if you build your position and you play a5, try to bring your pieces and to b6, because it will be good for you. Bishop c3, bishop b5, bishop g7, queen takes g7, b3, but I'd still think that knight b6 would be a great move. Because now we can see that already we're very, very close to infiltrate through the c line. Takes b3. Now I don't like this move. It's just too passive. Even though we're a pawn up, we still need to play aggressive chess. Otherwise, we won't win the game. Rook e8, queen b2. Now, knight b6 is obviously still a move, but how else could white reorganize his pieces in this position? Any suggestions? Again, what are white's worst pieces in this position? Yes.
Knight on A4.
The knight on A4. What else?
The rook and E1.
Not the rook on E1, the other rook.
Oh.
The other rook on A3 is doing absolutely nothing now. So how can we reorganize that these pieces come to life again? Yes?
Can you play B4? That way you're opening.
Well, we just played B3, so playing B4 now would be a waste of tempo and not a good idea in general here. Well, we could, for one thing, we can reroute the knight to C3, defending the E4 pawn, so we'll never drop that. And also exchanges are not bad for us. We're still a pawn up. So we should be much better here. How else can we reorganize? Yes?
Rook A1.
Rook A1. And even though these moves seem passive from afar, it's very important to connect the rooks. And in the long run, we'll bring the rook to C1, and after knight B6, again, we're going to be able to bring a piece to the C7 square. B3, rook E8, but queen B2 was played, rook E5. Black is consistent with his play, though. He doesn't want to exchange queens, and he's trying to put as much pressure on white as possible. Rook A1, a good move with the same intention we were talking about. F3, knight B6. I'm not fond of the timing of knight B6 here. What is the issue with knight B6 at this very moment? What should white be concerned after F3? Yeah? His kingside pawn structure. So how can he save his kingside pawn structure so it doesn't get ruined? Yes? G3, yeah. And then white would be clearly better, and I don't think that white would have any problems after G3. So knight B6, F takes G2. Obviously, black takes the moment when he can and takes on G2. Bishop B5, A takes B5, rook D1. Rook D1, again, I don't like, because rook C1 would make more sense with the hope of sometimes invading on the C line. Rook D1 is actually not doing much. Knight E8, rook C1. Now this is a good move. Even though white wasted a tempi with rook D1, sometimes realizing your mistake and playing the good move the second time is still better than not playing the good move at all. Knight F6, rook C8. I like this move, rook C8. Why is this rook C8 move so good? Yes?
Well, because he's trying to trade off the rooks.
Mm-hmm.
And if he gets into the endgame, he's probably better, if not winning. And also, if they trade, the d-pawn's still very weak, so he can like attack it multiple times and hopefully win.
Yeah. So, as you said, you're correct saying that if we manage to exchange off pieces, we're some material up, or we have at least some hopes for a passed pawn. So most likely we will be winning the position. So exchanging pieces in this Benoni structure is pretty good for white right now. Rook takes C8, knight takes C8, queen D7, queen C3. A very strong move. Planning to invade on the C line while defending the C8 knight. King H7, knight B6, queen F7, queen F3. Bringing the queen closer so the king will have some defenders around it. G4 takes, H5, F4. Now F4 is a bit too aggressive because black usually tries to mate white in the Benoni defense. And if he doesn't manage to do so, he'll lose. But by playing f4, white is playing into the hands of black. G takes f3, queen takes f3, check, rook g5. Actually, knight takes e4 would seem like a decent move. Rook g5, knight c8, knight takes e4, knight e7, knight d2, knight takes g6. Now, before coming here, I checked this position, and knight takes g6 wasn't too good. Actually, white is winning here. How can white win this position? White is attacking black's queen on g6, but his own queen is attacked on f3. So naturally, we might think of a way of double attacking. And possibly that's the solution. But how can we do it in this position? It's actually a very complicated position. Yes?
I think queen e3 or queen f4.
Which one you'd feel, queen e3 or queen f4?
I think queen e3. Probably.
Okay, so we have suggestions of queen e3 and queen f4. Anyone wants to have their own bet what should be the good move here? So one of these moves we're winning, the other is not winning, according to the engine. Shockingly, in this position, queen e3 doesn't win. Queen f4 wins, and also queen f2 wins. Now I'll show the ones that win. Queen f2 is the cleanest, actually, because after queen h6, white has a very simple solution of checking. And, oh, it's not in here. Queen f7, check, queen checks. This is supposed to win somehow. So this is supposed to win, but actually queen f4 is the cleanest. I mean, queen f4 is the other solution, apart from queen f2. And after queen h6, this made me laugh very heartily. The only move that wins in this position, queen f2. That makes absolutely no sense, but queen f2 is the only move in this position that wins. It's unbelievable. It's mostly because black cannot afford to defend all of his pieces, while black will just run out of moves for some reason. I don't know why. Queen f2. Yeah. So knight g6 was played, even though queen f2 or queen f4 is winning. Knight g6, knight takes f3, knight f8, king g1, rook f1, king takes, rook takes f3, king e7, check, check, and rook e3. And instead of checking, white decides to go rook c3. Now, this is a very unreasonable decision, I think, with white. If he's actually trying to make a draw, there's no reason to get out of the perpetual. If he's trying to win, he should have tried winning when the queens were on, I think. King f6, rook c7. Black made a nice defensive move here. Yeah?
Rook g8.
Not rook g8. Rook g7, correct. Rook c2, king e5, rook d2. And now black is suddenly much, much better, because of his king being so active and the white king shut out. King e4, rook f2 takes, rook f5, king e4, rook takes b5. And now the position is materially equal, but the d pawn is just much, much stronger than these pawns. Why? Yes?
Well, because it's a pass pawn.
It's a passed pawn. That's one of the reasons it's very strong. And there's another reason why this pawn will get extremely strong in the endgame.
So,
That is not quite the reason that we can exchange pieces. Actually, it will have to do with the difference between those two kings. The white king is shut out, so it cannot support any passed pawns, unlike the black king on e4, which will help nurse this pawn into beautiful queen. d5, b4, d4, takes, d3, rook h8, d2, rook d8, king e3, b5, rook g4, and after building bridge and threatening rook e4 and rook d4, white is totally busted because there's no way white can stop this d pawn from promoting. So white took on d2, sadly, takes, h3, rook a4, takes, king g2 and king e2. And this, as you point out, is lost for white. It's a sad game from white's perspective, as he played the middle game very, very well, but should have played much more courageously in the later part. And if he would have tried to outsmart his opponent in the tactical complications, most likely he would have at least clinched a draw or a win. So coming to the next game, we'll see a blitz game. Knight c6. Even bishop d2 is a rare move. Knight c6 is even rarer in this Nimzo structures. a3, takes, d5, c takes d5. I'm not fond of this c takes d5 idea because it just loses time. White should be aiming to develop his pieces with e3, castles, knight f3, and possibly bishop d3 castles. C takes d5, therefore, is not that good. Knight takes d5, e4, takes, castles, d5. Why is this d5 move not so great here? Yes?
well, it kind of splits up the pawns.
Yes, it's aesthetically unpleasant even to look at it because white just gives up this beautiful center, which is aesthetically very nice. And after d5, you can see it doesn't look good. It just doesn't feel right. Also, white is neglecting development. Knight e5, d takes e6, bishop takes e6, takes, rook d1. Now, if you're black, what you should be doing in this position? Yes, if you're black, what you should be doing in this position? You have like 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 tempi up with black. Yes?
Trade off.
Trade off.
I want to take on d1 personally because
Mhm.
king can't castle.
Yeah. So it's a good idea to exchange. And actually, black did. Played bishop b3, rook d8. And white's main issue is that he's like 2 tempis behind. He would be maybe around equal if he could develop his pieces out. But it's already kind of too late. White is totally taking over. I mean, black is totally taking over. King b2, bishop c4, takes, king b3, knight d2. Black is just collecting everything, but this g3 was a very bad move. Obviously allowing knight takes f2, but it didn't happen for some reason. Knight f3 takes, rook f1, knight e4, knight d4, c5. Now, I don't think c5 is such a great move. White has some threats now. How can we defend against those? Yes?
I would say probably he didn't play knight takes f2 because probably it's a blitz game, I mean.
Yeah, but how can we, in this position, how can we just develop our initiative with black?
Well,
Because white has one little trick up his sleeve in this position. It's a simple one, but it's still there. What's undefended for black?
yeah, he's starting to play rook e1.
Yeah, so white is threatening to bring his rook to e1 and have some back rank tricks. So I think g6 would be an idea just to create a luft for the king. Now, black plays c5, which shouldn't be played because it just weakens the structure on the queen side. Knight b5, rook a6, again moving away from the right squares. The rook belongs to the d line. Also, rook d2 check would have been much stronger. Rook a6, rook e1, rook a5, which is again a blunder because if rook takes e4, if takes, then it's checkmate. So c4, knight f6, rook e7, h6, rook b7, knight g4, rook a7. And the only reason I'm showing this game, this part of the game, is that black is neglecting something crucial. What is black not using in an endgame? Yes,
King.
his king. The king was stationing on g8 forever. Whenever you see and you play an endgame, bring your king much closer to the center so you can stop, for example, this a pawn from queening. a4, knight g4, a5, knight e3, g5, which is again not a great move because king takes would win. But a6 is winning just because of the fact that the king is so far away. King f8 takes, h5, knight c6, and the pawn promotes. So really the moral of this game is bringing your king when it's an endgame. For example, if he would have played the normal g6 move, let's say king d3, knight c5 here, knight e6, takes, rook d1, king f8, and just because I brought my king closer, if white plays rook d7, I can play rook e7. And already all of my pawns are defended, I'm just completely winning. That's kind of a way of winning endgames by bringing your king into the game. Okay, let's see another game. This was a chess.com game as far as I know. d4, d5, c4, d takes. What opening is this? Can anyone help me with that? Yeah? The Queen's Gambit accepted. e4, b6. Now this is a very bad move. Black should be playing e5 or knight f6 a la Korchnoi, who wants to get an Alyoshin-like position with e5, knight d5 takes, knight b6, knight c6, and bishop f5 or bishop g4. With a lot of theory. It's an interesting game. But black plays b6, which is not good and not the best among the alternatives. Bishop takes c4, bishop b7, knight c3, e6, a3. I like this a3 move, kind of creating a hideout for the bishop on a2. Bishop e7, knight f3, knight f6, queen c2, h6. Now this h6 move is a little bit suspicious because white will attempt to play along this b1 h7 diagonal. Castles, bishop, rook e1, a6, bishop f4, c5, rook d1, b5, d takes c5, queen c8, bishop a2, queen takes c5. And how can white continue in this position? How can white put pressure on this diagonal?
Oh, bishop e3.
Yes? Yeah?
Bishop
Listen.
B1.
Bishop b1. And now this is deadly. It's like poison for black. Because the only way to stop in these type of positions this battery from mating is to play g6. But sadly g6 is not a good move here because bishop takes h6. That is the reason why black should have thought about that and refrained from the idea of h6 and should have tried to use the pawn as a shield instead of just playing it there to h6. e5, well, that's a sad concession, but there's not much that black can do here. Bishop takes e5, knight d7, bishop d4, queen c4, e5. And now black is just completely lost because the knight cannot move because it's checkmate. g6, e takes f6, takes, bishop a2. And again, the bishop on a2 is the hero of the day. And after queen takes g6, black is just completely destroyed. Checks, and queen h7, checkmate. And last but not least, the game of the day. And I would call it the Greek gift or the gem from Greece. Jonathan Schranz found this game and suggested this one for me, and he called it the eternal YouTube submission. And I would agree. So Lioutas, the person who sent us this game, let us see this position, said that he felt that this combination was pretty good. And in hindsight, I have to agree. e4, d5, e takes d5. And everyone would play queen takes d5 here, but he plays e6. Can anyone tell me what's the name of this line? It's a very rare line. I never heard of it before. It's the bouquet gambit in the Scandinavian defense. So, unsurprisingly, white has to take, and he does. Bishop takes e6, knight f3, bishop c5. A very good aggressive move, even though white really should have played a very natural move here. How should white continue in this position? Yes, d4, of course. And after bishop b6, c3, just building a wall so this bishop will never ever have any chance of having any tactical ideas on the white king. But white played bishop e2, developed peacefully, queen e7, castle, knight f6, knight c3, a6. Now instead of a6, Lioutas should have followed it up with some speedy development. How can black develop more speedily than a6? Castling is quite speedy, but black is a pawn down, so naturally he should make the position as sharp as possible. If your opponent castles short, what is the sharpest way to play the position? Yes?
Castle opposite.
Yeah, castle opposite side. So how can we
Play knight c6.
do that? Yeah, with knight c6, exactly. Knight c6, and if d4 castles, we're going for mate now. Even after bishop e3, we might use our method of devil may care and just play knight g4 and just jump at his throat, trying to destabilize this bishop on e3. Instead, black played a6, which is a little bit slow though. d4, bishop b6, bishop g5, knight c6. And in the same way, how can black react to d5 in this position? There's a very, long castling. This is actually a very classic idea from the Scandinavian, and you might see them in many of those games. But white decided to play knight e4, castles, and he should have strengthened the center with c3, and then black would have been in trouble, to be honest. c3 would have been pretty good. But he took on f6, g takes f6, bishop e3, and the computers agree right now, and I would also say so. Black has very good attacking chances now. Rook g8, naturally looking and eyeing this g2 pawn, g3, bishop h3, rook e1, bishop g4. What's the main idea of bishop g4? Yes.
Well, I guess to take advantage of that he played g3 and the knight's pretty weak.
Yeah, it tries to take advantage of the knight being very weak. But what else does bishop g4 indirectly attacks?
The knight.
It directly attacks the knight. What else is threatened at the moment? Yes?
Bishop on e2 and queen on d1.
No. The d4 pawn. The idea of bishop g4 is one thing to attack the knight on f3, but also to destabilize the d4 pawn. And that's the main idea of that move. c4, which again misses the point and should have played c3. c4, he's trying to lock the bishop though. f5, queen c2, h5. Now, white is getting tricky. He wants black to take. But temptation doesn't work here, because knight takes, bishop takes d4, and if black would take the bishop, white could go ha-ha and take the g4 bishop. And black can't take it back because the queen is hanging. So h5, with the intention of opening up the position with h4. c5, bishop a7, knight h4, and the Greek game commences. It's black to move and play a spectacular sacrifice. Yes.
Queen takes h4.
And after g takes h4?
Yeah, I think that works. And then I guess
Bishop h3, then I block you with bishop g5.
Oh yeah, so it's bishop f.
Even if you bring the bishop to h3 or f3, I will still block you on g5.
True.
But you're close. You're very close.
Well, I guess then you take this bishop.
Yes, you take the bishop. Just as a reminder, white wouldn't lose after bishop takes e2 because of this nice intermediate move of knight takes f5. And after the queen moves, just rook e2 and white is much better. So this queen takes h4 sacrifice is more than justified and also very good. G takes h4, bishop takes e2. Now bishop g5 is only move because king h1, bishop f3 is mate. So bishop g5, only move. How should we continue here? Well, we're a queen down, so we might need some more reinforcements to actually break through. Also, we need a defender for this bishop on e2. Yes?
Rook d8?
Rook d8 would run to rook takes e2. Yes.
Knight takes d4.
Knight takes d4. Bringing in the knight and also defending the e2 bishop. Queen a4. Knight f3 check. King h1. And now black comes up with a brilliant idea. He notices that this king on h1 is kind of helpless. And with a very clever maneuver, he will set up decisive threats. The soul of this combination lies on this bishop. The bishop is the hero of this game. So we need to save that soul. Where would this bishop be?
B5.
Bishop b5, exactly. And now after queen f4, bishop c6, and now the bishop becomes the monster of this game. And black is totally winning. Queen takes f5, immediately loses. But already king g2 would run into rook d4 ideas, and with millions of threats from black, white is just completely lost. For example, let's say queen e3, rook g4 check, king f1, bishop b5 check. Well, it's kind of matter of taste. If queen e2, knight d2 checkmate. But if we like taking pawns, we can take on h2.
You have also rook g1.
Or rook g1, exactly.
Wow.
And that's a spectacular finish. Sadly, he played queen takes f. He took first and ran into this knight h4. Double check, and it wins the queen and the game. But this game deserves the finish of king g2, rook g1 mate. And this is the game from Greece. Thank you.